Hi everyone, welcome to our talk of the week. I am here with Mal in Mal Chriscelle's home in Cambridgeshire. So really good to be here. So we've asked them really to track with us as a church this year as we're looking to press into building community. And we've seen how they've lived as a household. Their children are now grown up, and over those decades they've lived as a household in a way that's really intentionally invested in their children, but also it's been a household that's been open to people outside. And they've really lived kind of kingdom, church, extended household way of living for many years. And we thought there's lots that actually we can learn from Mal and Chriscelle that we can both apply within Hope as a whole church community and also as households within Hope. So through the year, they're coming and bringing some teaching for us and some coaching. And before Christmas, we had our Thanksgiving festivals, and that was inspired by Mal and Chriscelle, and we used the American Thanksgiving date, but we were really having it as a time of thanking God for what He's been doing in our lives. And it was really special having these festival celebration moments in people's homes, and as a way of punctuating the year and helping us to build community. So today Mal's going to be speaking on Rites of Passage, and we'll be getting into that. And probably one of the most obvious rites of passage for us as Christians is baptism, the point at which we kind of go into water and emerge as part of our journey of following Jesus. So we're going to be talking about rites of passage and quite a lot about the kind of teenage years and what it is to bring young people, bring children through those years. And I just want to encourage you, if you don't have children, or if your children have grown up or whatever, then please, this message is still very much for you. It's one of our dreams as a church is to be a church that children love to be part of, and we know that by God's design, Jesus prioritized children and others. There's something so special about being multi-generational as church, and it takes a village to raise a child. There's so much that we can bring as a whole community, not just to serve each other, but also to receive as well through being part of this multi-generational community. So now, do you want to just start off by sort of positioning where we are in terms of last time and how this one fits in the grand plan?
The neighbours moment.
Yes.
Last time when you were with us.
Yeah.
So when we were last with you in November, we'd looked in October and November at the idea of, as a household, what are your rhythms? And household being the people you most do life with, not necessarily who you live with, people you most connect with and do life with. So that could be physical household, could be shared house, could be family, could be key friendships. It's whatever those people are. What are your rhythms? And we looked at the idea of weekly and daily rhythms that facilitate connection. And then last time we looked at your rhythms of the year, and there being 2 points to that. One being to understand the season that you're in, so that you can respond accordingly, and the other to know your place in the story. The verses in Romans 8:15 and 16 about when your spirit meets with God's spirit, you cry, Abba, Father. When your essence meets with His essence, and you know His acceptances and His security, that reinforcing of I know where I fit and where I belong. Yeah. And that being a real and intimate thing.
I was just saying that that word Abba is the Hebrew word for dad. It's quite an intimate word, isn't it? And I was in Jerusalem a few years ago and saw some young boys on the street just calling Abba after their dad, and it put that into a whole. So I have that mental picture when you're talking about that. It's a child intimately and calling for his dad, for his father.
And I think that the goal of that, in my mind, is that we have children that know that their security, that they're at peace because they know their place, they know they're accepted. And it's the idea of marking moments in our journey, so that we know our place, that we can look back positively on, I understand my spiritual journey, I understand my family journey of what I'm part of, I understand my cultural heritage journey of what I'm part of, and that all of those things can be celebrated. And I guess we the verse for us that has the most weight is one in Micah. Micah 6:5b, the second half of it, where it says, remember your journey. And we just love that phrase of remember your journey. And then it says two specific places from Shittim or Acacia Grove. Rude Bibles say Shittim, like the NIV. The NLT, the New Living, says Acacia Grove. Remember your journey from Shittim till Gilgal, that you would know the righteous acts of the Lord. And it's the idea that that was where the people of God were, remembering their journey from where God first got their attention and called them. And they knew his voice calling them through to where they fully consecrated, where they'd crossed the river, where they marked a moment, they made an Ebenezer to say, the Lord has brought us this far. And then there's this place at Gilgal where they consecrated themselves, they made themselves right before God, they marked themselves, they aligned themselves before God. I was telling you that it's one of the funniest, rudest bits in the Bible, where if you look in the explanation bit at the bottom, it says, at that place they were all circumcised, and they called that place Gibeath Haraloth. And then if you do down to the bottom where it says which means hill of foreskins, and it's the idea of this is where there was this massive marking moment, literally, where they marked we are now carrying our consecrated mark of who we are before God into as we live into the hoped for promise of what he has for us in the land he is giving us. We've gone from being called, released from captivity, and now come into freedom and his promise. And we're marking that, we have monuments to mark that, and a process that has got us there, that we will remember we'll remember our journey, that we would know the righteous acts of the Lord, that we'll carry with us how God has worked in our lives. So I guess I know Passover's going to be something we come up to later in the year, but it's almost one of that best example of a story where you're remembering what God has done, that you're reminding yourself of his goodness and his kindness and how he's freed people from captivity and brought freedom. And that it's a story that we are remembering that we are part of, and who God's character is in that, and what our relationship is to him. I think I told you about the professor of biblical law at Bristol Uni coming to one of our Passovers and saying, isn't it amazing that we are part of celebrating a story that has been celebrated every year for way more than 3,000 years, remembering the same story continuously every single year, and we're part of that. And just his kind of saying it in a way that was you're kind of contextualizing, putting us into we're remembering what a amazing thing we're part of as we remember this story. Just adds a level of richness even in how I understand my identity from what he's spoken to me in that moment.
I'm thinking too about how I think of within the festivals helping us to see as a community and celebrate the big picture, the big story that we're part of. And then the Rite of Passage I also think of as being quite a personal, especially in the case of circumcision, which we don't do anymore generally. Quite our personal moment. And I was thinking as well, Aaron often talks. I often talk with Aaron about a moment I went with him to Cwmbran in Wales. There was this outpouring of the Holy Spirit happening. Some amazing miraculous healings, and that was a point for Aaron where he was filled with the Holy Spirit for the first time, and he was significantly different after that. And so that would be a kind of heavenly ordained kind of rite of passage for him. We didn't sort of plan, right, Aaron, this is going to be your rite of passage on this date. But in a minute we're going to talk a bit about sort of teenage years and some intentional rites of passage stuff. And actually we're going to finish by hearing a bit from Amy and Jaeden, two of Mal's children, and what the experience was like for them. So we're also thinking about how we can, alongside those sort of divinely ordained powerful, weighty moments in that kind of we can't necessarily orchestrate. There's the planned stuff, and we are at the moment planning looking at how we can intentionally invest in children within hope, particularly as they move through the teenage years. So Alice and I have been planning some stuff for our children together with Ben and Joe, looking at there's a book by a guy called John Tyson. I've been talking with some dads in hope that are at that sort of life stage about this as well. John Tyson's written this book called it's either called The Intentional Father or The Primal Path, one of those, and it's really about the journey that he took his son on through the teenage years, of intentionally investing in him and providing a structure and opportunities and connection points for him to meet God and to grow and to mature from that journey from a boy into a man. Love to hear, Mal, what that journey's been like for you and some of how you've shaped some of those rites of passage and then sort of customized them to your children. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Just as almost a principles thing around this, do you remember we did the railway thing about the idea of the proactive and reactive?
Yeah.
When we encourage people when they start a small group, almost to tell each other's life stories, to do it almost how they've connected with God versus time, and to draw a graph, and then to put on it like the key moments, the defining moments. And I think what we found is when you hear people tell their stories, some of them are reactive, like that railway thing.
Yeah.
Some are where you're reacting to what life has done with you.
Sure.
And some of them are proactive, where it's like your choice to be baptized, or your choice to engage in a certain activity or marking moment thing. So yeah, we're aware that some things are reactive, but almost our responsibility is to put in that other side of the railway of what can we be intentional in, acknowledging that other things will go on. So some of those are chronological around birthdays. So we try and have developmentally, we have a list from 10 to 18 and we've changed it with each child, almost depending on who they are, what different thing almost marks that growing maturity. So at what point you have your own bank account, have your own mobile phone, have get ears pierced. One of them is a big pocket money hike when you say, I'm ready to buy my own clothes and toiletries. And you know, we found mainly gender, that it was younger for the girls and older for the guys, but that it would actually be and right the way through 0 to 18. Some of them are helped by the law. You know, you can now watch 15 movies, 18 movies. 18, they get a 30 quid to take everybody out for a drink and to actually be the one buying the drink and to buying everybody a drink, celebrating that as just a little moment as a rite of passage. Yeah. We've even used the glass blowing guys, the blue glass guys in both Bristol and Bath, where you can go and blow glass, so that they captured the air of when they turned 18. So they have a bauble with their name and 18 on it. That's their 18-year-old breath.
Wow.
Just marking,
so cool. Just
almost celebrating them and who they are. So there's the chronological ones that kind of point to you are growing up and you're learning more about life and what goes with that. So there's a whole list that we try to, and we've adapted it for each child.
Yeah.
Then spiritual ones would be both event and process. The event things, obviously baptism. 2 of our kids decided to get baptized in their teenage years as a invite everybody in who's been part of their journey. The process one, that was a really big one for us, was to say when you were born, you had godparents that we chose who were there to support us and pray for you and maybe connect with you, and some you connected with, some you didn't. But now you're entering towards teenagedom and thinking about being more independent to interdependence. We'd love you to choose somebody who could be your mentor through teenage years. So 13 was when the deal was they come up with a short list of names, but we'd agree and then we would ask, not them ask. So then, but in terms of our wider community, it's tended to be somebody between our two generations, and the only deal was it would be somebody they could talk to anything about, anything they had questions about, and especially sex. And even some people said, well, what about it if they wanted it to be your child? Like if they wanted it, said, Mum, Dad, I wanted it to be you.
Yeah.
Then that's great if you can talk about anything sexual and anything that's temptation or porn or whatever. If you can talk about that, then I think you can do it. Yeah. So that was a really big one, to then have somebody that they knew was journeying with them in the wider community. And I think when a whole community starts to own this idea that you said about community raising a child, it really kicks in, I think, at that point as a helpful element. And that just to dwell on that feels to me like a sort of sweet spot, like a kind of goal, isn't it? That something about and there's practicalities around safeguarding and appropriateness on this that we obviously need to do well and right, but that to me feels really kingdom, really Jesus way, that there will be, like within us as a church community, people, a range of people that children can connect with safely, and that can be a richness in all sorts of ways, rich for the adult, for the young person, and just bringing different perspectives and a wholeness to life that is something that we want to do carefully, and we need to do that safely, and with the parents having a covering and a leading role in it. But and that's why it has to be agreed. That's the great safety valve.
Yeah.
Is that if it's everybody's talking about it and it's agreed.
Yeah.
And affirmed by the parents.
Yeah, sure.
Then it's then it becomes the mandate is there.
Yeah.
But also I think it's the wider community element of one of the event things we've done. I don't think we've fully nailed this. I'd love to dig into this more, but we've tried to do a whole community event, which we did best in the States, where it was focused on fathers and sons, but it was all the men that were committed to these, in the lives of these young boys and the boys, and then separately all of the mums and all of the girls, having a moment to call them into their growth in their gender and who they are. And the boys did that by going camping on a camping trip.
So were these your boys at a similar age? Or?
Yeah, I think it was 15, 14, okay. The year that was 14, 15 in school.
Yeah.
And camping trip, start one point, end in another. The first half was to remember their journey, do the Micah 6 thing of remembering the journey, remembering what's happened in their journey so far, and doing some conversations and activities of remembering where God has already spoken or spoken to them, or what their experience has been so far. And then in the route they reached a ravine, and the ravine was like had a rope bridge across it, a little bit like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, that like slightly dodgy,
slightly dangerous.
Yeah, an element of jeopardy involved.
Crocodiles?
No.
No, okay.
And then all of the adults went across first, leaving the boys on the other side, and then they called them out by name.
Wow. And
as they started to cross, all of the men were just speaking what they saw over them, calling them into encouraging them into this transition into adulthood. I think we were a bit informed by Richard Rohr's stuff on this. He wrote a book about Adam, where he talks about what maturity looks like, and there are 5 questions you need to be able to answer in this book, where you really have engaged with maturity. And that's that journey of initiation or crossing over, isn't it? And that's what he talks about. Boy into man. Tribal initiation, and that you understand you're part of something bigger. You understand you're not the centre of the universe. You understand you're going to die. You understand that tough things happen. and you're encouraged to speak what your response is going to be to each of those 5.
Yeah.
That's what we've done as that process with both.
And that really, because I've read that book and been thinking about that, and I really recognise in my own life where there have been aspects of uninitiation, and it's actually helped me to reframe some of my younger experiences when I think about them through a lens of actually that was, rather than people being harsh with me and seeing it negatively that I need to forgive people for and be healed from, actually instead I can see there were moments of initiation helping me to make that transition from life is easy and comfortable into step up and take responsibility. It's on you now in a way that's really healthy. And so I've seen in my own life where a lack of initiation and lack of that has made life harder, and there's a liberation that comes, isn't there? When you're called up by other men and you're I find this, as a pastor in the city, meeting with other church leaders, there's something that they can call out in me because they've been through, they're ahead of me, they're older than me, they've done it as well. And I think similar thing for the generations, isn't there? Someone who's been as grown up as a woman can speak to a girl and help her into that journey in a way.
And even the I believe in you,
I
think is the most incredible thing. If we know that we're secure, and if we know that we're loved and accepted, and there are people around us saying, I believe in you, we all need that. And if we're going to achieve our potential, we're going to see the kingdom come in our lives, having somebody else. I always think of Jonathan's armor bearer in 1 Samuel 14. He says, when Jonathan has this crazy plan, he says, do what you have in mind, I'm with you heart and soul. And just people who are saying, do what you have in mind, I'm with you, heart and soul, I believe in you. Ephesians 4:1, where it says, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you received. That there are people going, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you've received. Not serve me, but you live into, as you cross, you live into what you're called to. And if we can have markers of that, that celebrate both the spiritual, what God's doing with us, those defining moments, but also celebrate almost our age and stage, maturity moments, and our cultural, our family, what we're part of, I think we become way more secure people who know our place, know we're loved, know we're accepted, and then we become powerful people, I think, as we come into that. The only other one that we have, the only other thing I'd say particularly as a marker moment with this age group is physically celebrating. So I remember when we didn't have any kids and hearing somebody just telling the story of, it was a woman telling us how proud she was of her husband when she left the 4 children with her husband, and one of the eldest of her children started their period. And the woman going, I didn't know what he'd do, and he said, come on, let's all go out for a meal and celebrate our daughter. And I thought, I love that. And when we had children, I want to do that. And then, it's years later, then having kids and then saying, when you reach physical maturity, we want to mark it by celebrating, and we're going to all dress up and have it, and you get to choose the restaurant. It's just got to be posh. It can't be Subway or something. It's got to be posh because we're celebrating. And we would, and with our girls starting their periods, and with the boys, there was a fair amount of conversation about what was the right biological transition. Some unhelpful suggestions by the sisters, but we landed on first shave, and that moment of having the first shave and then going out and celebrating and marking the moment with them. I think that's the for that age group, they're the things that we've most put in place.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to get Amy and Jaeden to join us now, and we'll ask them what it was like experiencing some of those rites of passage.
Brilliant. And on Sunday, we'll also talk a little bit more, dig into not just how does it take community to raise a child and the age and stage developmental things, but I think some of the questions around what are the things in your household that you want to celebrate in your key relationships as a rite of passage, whether that is acknowledging the culture that you're part of, the family history. What are the things that are your celebrations that you want to put in, even as annual festivals? Whether it's your cultural history, the countries that you've been involved in and celebrating those places, your family stuff. What is it that you want to celebrate to mark the moment, to acknowledge your own journey, to remember the journeys of your household, and who do you want to celebrate there? I was telling you, our probably biggest one at the moment is my father-in-law with Alzheimer's, who's 92, and he comes most alive reading the family history that he has. We're celebrating his and remembering the journey that he's gone through. On Sunday we'll look more at some of that as well.
Brilliant. Great. So this is Amy and this is Jaeden, and we thought it'd be a great idea to ask them what it's like to live through a Calladine, Mal Chriscelle household rite of passage. Boom. Who's going to start?
Jaden's going to start.
Good.
I think it's funny, it's just going into the non-specifics of just marking moments. The one thing that is always there is food for some reason. It's almost, I'm trying to think of more like specific ones, but all that's coming to mind is kind of smaller milestones, and then mostly celebrating those with food, which is that's my first thing coming to mind. Going out for meals or making big meals. It's the same thing with celebrations. Our celebrations are also usually themed around meals. I guess we just like meals.
It's amazing we're all not huge.
Yeah. I said that quietly. So it wasn't in there. Yeah. So going for a very specific one for me, it's when I first shaved. It's going on what we were briefly mentioning there. So kind of that starting to hit puberty, growing up from being a child, and kind of marking that moment, and having the responsibility of choosing the restaurant. Oh, yeah, that was part of the thing.
So just talk us through that. So what did that first shave look like? Was it a father son moment? Was everyone there? Was it like
I think everyone was there.
Really, for the actual shave or for the celebration?
Definitely for a few people were there. I know Mum and Dad were in the room.
Okay.
I've had a great hair journey actually. I could probably mark down rites of passage.
You've got a good bit of facial hair.
Yeah, and then Amy was there when I shaved my head. So
I shaved your head. I wasn't just there. I did it.
Indeed.
Now let's get into. Tell us a bit more. Give us a little bit of insight into that. So, what time of day was it? Well, I don't know.
It's so funny because it's always, when you're that age, there's not much there. So I think it was a bit like I wanted the excuse to be like I'm growing up. I think I was like 13, maybe 14. And it was like, there's enough wispy hairs there. Let's go shave it and then we can go and have my meal. Yeah.
And would there be any standouts for you in terms of the significance of that moment in your life journey?
I mean, it definitely marks the moment from, that's almost when we first got here to Bristol as well.
Yes.
So I think a lot of these things kind of coincide. So that was, moving into this house, being in a new space is also kind of what that symbolises for me. I've got quite nicely compartmentalised, as a new era of my life begins, almost very neatly, we've always moved to a new place.
Okay.
So, in having childhood in America, starting to enter teens, childhood in England, starting to enter teens in America, and then coming back when I was fully a teen, and then moving out when I was going to university when I became an adult at 18ish. Yeah, very nicely segmented. There you go, meals and moving, that's what I do.
Thanks, Jaden.
Stick and move.
Amy, how about you?
Mine, because I don't know, rites of passage. So the only one I was saying I could think about was a similar thing. Was that basically it was our like coming of age thing, and that because it's not like an English thing to do like a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah kind of thing. That was for the girls, like for Jaden it was first shave, for the girls it was first period, which has meant I think that actually just makes it a little bit more normal of something to talk about, which actually I do think is nice that it's then a conversation and then not awkward.
What were you saying about your housemate?
That she found she doesn't talk to anyone about it. Well, now she does because her sister's a midwife. So she was like, so now cervix come up all the time, and my dad's like, which is quite fun. But I think for me then, I know that like my first period for a lot of my classmates was actually like, oh no, it's begun, and people being quite upset. And for me it was like, I got Indian dinner out of this, and it was really exciting. And they let me order dessert as well. I got a coconut ice cream, I remember that. I was very excited about it. But I think that being the number one thing I could think of where it was marking something and actually making something that could have been negative positive.
Yeah, I'd actually parrot that for also the moving out thing. As a rite of passage is something that is a scary thing, but almost to celebrate it and be like marking it more of an exciting moment instead of like a last meal. You know, it was a celebration, not a
Brilliant. Thanks guys, that's cool.
Oh, good.
That was really good.
Thank you.